573. For what purpose does the gentleman from Utah rise?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment made in order under the rule.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 2, printed in House Report number 110-573, offered by Mr. Cannon of Utah.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1084, the gentleman from Utah, Mr. Cannon, and a member opposed each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Utah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise today to offer an amendment that is necessary to refine the vague language contained within this bill. The legislation requires that lands included in the National Landscape Conservation System be managed for values, without ever defining what the term values means. And as we all know, values have different meaning to different people. In the case of land management agencies, values can range from cultural and historic resources to things as nebulous as smellscapes. The loose definition of the underlying bill leaves the federal government open to litigation based on what someone may or may not determine to be consistent with what they believe are the values of lands included within the National Landscape Conservation System. Our federal land management agencies are currently overwhelmed with litigation which distracts from their primary mission of land management. This amendment will prevent unnecessary and onerous litigation. While the underlying legislation has a savings clause, it does not prevent the bringing of a lawsuit. We have been assured time and again that activities on these lands currently allowed will continue without a problem. However, the language does not include important and defined terms such as multiple use. To illustrate the problem, in the event that multiple use activities such as grazing are currently occurring on lands within the NLCS system, and an individual or group decides that grazing activities are not consistent with the values of NLCS lands, they can sue to stop the grazing activities. Consequently, a permitted activity is left open under this new regime to lawsuits based on the loose definition of values. Unless the parameters by which management is to occur are clearly defined, passage of the underlying bill would create standards which are not practical to administer. This will allow external groups of all kinds to challenge the BLM's management of NLCS lands based upon what the perceived values of these lands are. My amendment merely will prohibit lawsuits against the Bureau of Land Management based on how they manage the lands under the NLCS system. Given the huge cost that we are now suffering with litigation, preventing unnecessary litigation should be a goal of this body. I urge all of my colleagues to support getting dollars to the for management rather than tying them up in legal proceedings. And I urge support for this amendment and reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. For what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona rise?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Claiming time in opposition.
Gentleman is recognized. Is the gentleman opposed to the bill, to the amendment?
Not necessarily.
The gentleman is recognized. Without objection.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, as with most of these amendments, the Cannon amendment is clearly unnecessary. Once again, we have in this bill an ironclad savings clause, which I demonstrated earlier. That would be after the enactment of H.R. 2016. Nothing in this act would diminish or enhance that, and the ability to sue plaintiffs that they have under current law, that would not be changed by 2016, and nothing in this act would change that. Nothing we do here creates a federal cause of action, and since the creation of the system in 2000, nothing ever has. The proponents of this amendment are looking for a problem where a problem doesn't exist. However, if the proponents of this amendment will feel more comfortable if we include language that simply states the obvious, then we will not oppose the amendment, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Utah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the gentleman's accepting this amendment, and without further ado, yield back.
All time. Gentleman from Arizona.
Yield back, Mr. Chairman.
All time has ended. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Utah. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is adopted.